Welcome everyone to the November 2021 edition of Poets versus the Pandemic. Tonight, we're featuring poet Alan King reading from his new book, Crooked Smiling Light, along with Stephen Leyva. Unfortunately, poet Saida Agostini has taken ill and will not be joining us, and we do wish her a speedy recovery. With me tonight is Callan Alanier as co-host and WordWorks founder. As we wind up our 2021 season, I want to thank all of you who've supported our program, which is all about providing a reading space for poets whose books have come out during this time of pandemic. Let me also thank the WordWorks for their help in making all of this possible. Okay, let's get started. First, and most importantly, we want you to purchase the poets' books. So I'll put a link into the chat that will take you to the places where you can purchase the books of each of our poets tonight. We also have a donation button on that page, so don't feel shy about donating to our program. We at the WordWorks and Cafe Muse will thank you wholeheartedly. I'm also going to put into the chat the link where you can follow our WordWorks online readings, sign up on the registration form on that page, and you'll be on our mailing list to get Zoom links for all our readings. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poets, feel free to drop a question into the chat. We're going to have time, I believe, for a little Q&A at the end of the readings of these two poets, and Karen Alanier will lead that, and she will ask questions that have been dropped into the chat. So please avail yourself of that. And a couple more things. Please join us on Monday, December 6, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present Danica Kelly and Jay Rogoff. And on December 15, 2021, instead of Poets versus the Pandemic, we'll be releasing our 2021 year in review on YouTube. It's a tribute to all of the poets we presented this year in Cafe Muse and Poets versus the Pandemic, and has clips of everybody. So if you've been on our programs this year, you'll be able to see yourself again. And if you've been an appreciative audience, you'll be able to recapture some of that Cafe Muse Poets versus the Pandemic experience. So let me introduce Alan W. King. Alan King is the author and poet, journalist, and videographer. He is the author of the 2016 collection Point Blank and Drift, a 2012 collection. His honors include fellowships from Cave Canem and Voices of Our Nation's Art Foundation. He's a 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee, as well as having 3 nominations for Best of the Net selections. He's a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA Low Residency Program at the University of Southern Maine, and his work has appeared in various literary journals, magazines, and have been featured on public radio. His work includes powerfully imaginative witness poems, as well as tender lyrical examinations of contemporary life. His work is highly visual, both on the page and in his amazing multimedia work. So without more, let me bring up Alan King to the Poets versus the Pandemic Zoom stage. Alan, have at it.
Thank you. Henry, I gotta say, you have an awesome announcer voice. Like, I feel like I'm getting ready to go in the ring and start going a few rounds. Like, you were announcing, I almost saw like this mic just dropping from the sky. But thank you for the intro. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you to WordWorks for keeping the series going. Very excited to be here. Excited to read with Stephen Leyva. So I'm just going to jump into it. I'm going to be mostly reading from my new chapbook, Crooked Smiling Light. It was just published by Plan B Press. And yeah, so I'll just go ahead and get started. The first poem is The Journey. And in the epigraph is a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer that opens the poem. So that quote is, "Each day is a little life, every waking and rising a little birth, every fresh morning a little youth, every going to rest and sleep a little death." That's Arthur Schopenhauer. The poem is titled The Journey. The diner's nearly empty. when you both arrive, except for the six or so other patrons and a waitress who calls everyone hun. The fluorescent lights lick the Formica bar and chrome stools, the black and purple beaten booths, and a straw-headed boy staring at you over cold chicken strips, the ketchup, a sticky scab on his plate. He reminds you of the little girls the night before, running through a restaurant in Berlin, Maryland, where you and your wife once stayed at a hotel known to be an antique. Its hardwood bathroom floors, the claw-footed tub with its wraparound shower curtain, the portraits of hoop-skirted women twirling parasols, the prairie-style wooden armoire closet, the two girls laughing as they ran through the drummer's cafe, stopped at the sight of you and your wife, the only Black people in the restaurant that night. When you remember the patron's darting eyes at your wife's dreadlocks, the way the hostess smiled past you to the white family she seated while you waited, when all around you the consensus seemed to echo the nursery rhyme. How did it get so late so soon? It's night before it's afternoon. You remember the loneliness of feeling like the only one fighting for sanity when the world makes you someone else. You watch your wife rub her full moon and talk to your daughter 27 weeks alive inside her, knowing that each day is a little life, each step towards progress, a little birth, even if the journey is full of off ramps, like the one that brought you both to a bright diner on your way home, to the slurping straw that says the blonde boy savoring what's left of his chocolate shake before he sacks out on the plush seat, his mom flipping through a magazine, picking at her fries. You watch him wrapped in his blue blanket as if sleep weren't a little death, as if the world weren't a dark dream, haunted by a boogeyman's appetite for innocent things. So this next poem is The Island of Smiles. And this was one of those poems, it's about, one of those times when my wife and I, when we were still dating. Well, we are still dating, but before we were married. So this is The Island of Smiles, and it opens with a quote from the poet Jack Myers. The quote says, "The world once beyond the end of my thumb is now inside us. Everything we've lived is now part of us." That's Jack Myers, and that was from his poem Dog's Day Out. But this poem is called The Island of Smiles. Candlelight fingering our misty limbs, and you nibbling a happy earlobe makes our living room a glad sanctuary of plush red cushions. The raspberry scented hookah haze almost makes the air edible. Your spicy tongue rolls the hours back to us strolling through Adams Morgan, and your sly smile when you said, "The birthday girl gets what she wants." That was after fried plantains and beef pepper stew, egusi with fish and white rice. It was after us head bobbing to bass guitars, throbbing reggae inside Bukum. To think this life once seemed a world beyond me, an island of floating cabins, singing toucans, and water so green and emeralds in daylight. That happiness once seemed so cosmic. I was a sad astronomer, watching the sky and cursing the improbable distance, till a friend's invitation got us together that night, shuffled in the years stacked behind us. If every moment we live is now part of us, tonight we are a rainy evening and a cramped African restaurant. We're the storm glazed streets outside Bazaar Atlas. You haggling a Moroccan merchant's price on hand sewn leather sandals and sweet shisha tobacco. We're the ride home before the sandalwood's burnt offering, before the tiger's eye shimmer on your thighs from a small flame's broken light. So this next poem, believe it or not, is for my wife. The way and I say that because when you hear the poem start out, you're like, oh, but this is for my wife. It's also my dad is in this poem, and so kind of like a nod to some of the wisdom he tried bestowing on me when I was too young to get it and too young to appreciate it. So this is gluttony, combing the bargain bin. A woman who's not your wife brushes beside you, asking if the Roy Hargrove CD you're holding is any good. She's close enough for you to smell her ginger patchouli body wash, the angle she gives you in her leather bomber jacket, the one unzipped showing a white tee retracing her athletic stomach and arms, the jacket with its collar flared makes her a bright blossom booming its honeydew scented tune along her neckline. And your father's voice from 2 decades before warns you about gorging on everything you see. You were 16 the first time he told you, when your hunger hovered like that summer at Myrtle Beach. Sister strutting the boardwalk beneath a honey barbecue sun whose sweet light made each of them a long stretch of marinade, a chromatic scale of flavors along which your tongue was burning to play. And isn't temptation always lurking, eager to hold our common sense hostage? You tell the flower woman you're married after she points to a flyer for a Roots show and says y'all should go. When she asks, are you happy? You remember a brother once asking how you could love one woman when the world's a buffet, the possibilities of pleasure laid out like jumbo crab cakes, lasagna rolls, and buffalo wings. What's gluttony if not a symptom of our own hunger consuming us? Wasn't Jack as careless selling his sustenance for a handful of beans? You remember the story of the stalk that almost made him a hungry giant's grub. You still hear the pastor preaching about gluttons wearing the rags of drowsiness, which is how your wife found you, stumbling through the days. Your life before her was a stringless violin, a dark garden of wilted sunflowers, a camper trailer rusting against a moldy brick wall. You were once a city of power lines, boarded up clock towers, junked cars, and blazing drum barrel fires. What she saw in you, only her heart knows. Just like it knew you'd leave the temptress back at the listening booth, watching the automatic doors close behind you. At 16, you thought all there was to living was filling your appetite. Too young to know love is the everyday meal, that the lack of it kills quicker than the absence of food. Thank you. So, these next two poems, uh, you know, we've we've had like some difficult, we've gone through difficult moments, but these two poems kind of speak to a moment that where we were probably it's probably one of those moments where we were most scared of. And so the poems are self-explanatory, but all I'll say is that the first poem leads up to when my wife and I had to have surgery, and then the second poem follows, the surgery. So first poem is Beacon. An intern asks, "Aren't you scared?" And you remember the hospital clerk saying what you're doing is courageous. You do what you have to for your wife whose life is leashed to a box, cleaning her blood before spooling it back into her body. It does what it has to because her kidneys can't. And weren't they courageous standing their ground before lupus took them out? Its gluttony left you scratching your head, lost in this new life, the one that marks you donor and your wife recipient, the one where the transplant centers another turf to navigate. This life, where words like renal failure and nephrectomy seizing your new tongue. You watch your wife sleep while the machine chimes and beeps, remembering the intern's question. Of course, there were moments that gobbled your bravery to a morsel. The emergency room visits, lupus nearly taking her out. And isn't she the courageous one? How she welcomes each day, even those where grief is the overcast sky. Those moments when the only light is a heroic heart blazing these dark streets, winding beyond the mysterious and unknown into the light. You're a floor below me, healing in your room. Both of us soar from the divine puppetry of science. God pulling the surgeon's strings, sliding the kidney from inside me, routing it to its new body in Connecticut. And wasn't he present in the hand's death dance and how hope lit the operating room like a stage? Your new kidney ready for its debut inside you, having traveled in a freight of prayers, 17 hours from Minneapolis to DC. Didn't our road here seem even longer, not being a direct match? The hiccup in lab results, us hurling our names into an exchange pool deep with uncertainty. And here we are in our beds, an elevator ride from each other. This moment, like the 90-degree day beyond our windows, the cloudless sky, shadows receding in the sunlight. All right, so I'm going to skip a poem because Stephen had a request. So I'm going to come back to that to Stephen's request. I'm going to read these three poems and I'll jump into Stephen's request. So I haven't forgotten you, Stephen. So this next poem is it's kind of it's one of those things. So like it's like like whenever I don't know about anybody else, but I know for me, whenever I encounter someone who's ahead of me, like in a certain life stage or whatever, I get kind of envious of them, want to catch up, but I could never catch up to them because the simple fact that they were there before I got there, they will always be ahead of me, what that is. And so this poem was inspired by a conversation with my brother-in-law. And yeah, it's self-explanatory, but it's opens with an epigraph, quote in the epigraph says, "When you run the marathon, you run against the distance, not against the other runners, and not against the time." And that was from Haile Gebrselassie. And the poem is from my brother-in-law, Tolu. It's called Stride. "I don't remember when it happened," he says. "All I know is one day Eli put himself to bed. You watch your brother in law with an envy you haven't felt since you were 16, when you learned your little brother lost his virginity before you. You remember feeling like he crossed the finish line before you started the race. Your brother, far beyond the horizon of that milestone. You're just as far behind your brother in law, wishing you could breeze the distance to him in this full marathon called parenting. Even now, He's disappearing from your field of vision as he goes on about his kids sleeping in their rooms, while your 3-year-old holds your bedtime hostage, demanding another story, crying and jumping when you say it's sleepy time. She's taken over your California king, doing mixed martial arts in her sleep. The toddler with the elbow and knee strikes, the jabs and overhand punches. Your bonnet donning pajama kid tests your limits when each sleepless night leaves you like a runner at mile 20, hunched over, gasping, glinting with sweat, muscles blazing. But this is just the starting line of a long distance test of patience. It's how your parents must have felt, especially your poor dad. It couldn't have been easy being the only foreigner at his job, trading barbs with the other black electricians who riffed on his accent and the extra stuff he got from the white foreman. It couldn't have been easy trying to keep it together, verbally sparring with guys he was smarter than, then coming home to your attitude. How many times you almost broke his patience when he nearly came out of himself to give you a piece of his mind. Luckily, he never broke his stride. And if you learned anything from him, it's enjoying the small victories, even in the moments that seem hard. It's a lesson your brother in law takes in strides. His stories about his kids are his way of coaching you to keep running. So, thank you. So, the next poem is Land of Innocence, and it's dedicated to my 18-month-old Jade Rose and George Floyd, The Land of Innocence. A YouTube clip shows a protest ignited after police killed George Floyd, torch SUVs, overturned cop cars, armored officers retreating. All of that sinks my wife into a deeper postpartum, having made it through our personal crisis. We watched the python of despair coil itself around America, blowing out glass storefronts and colliding angry bodies as the tension constricts and crushes. We're miles from the mayhem, but a different kind of danger finds us in the maternity ward. A decreasing heartbeat, frenzied nurses rushing my wife to the OR, surgeons scrambling to save our daughter. Watching the news, I'm reminded of slogans on chaos as necessity. Real discoveries come from chaos. Chaos is beautiful and full of fertility. But when it's a violent pattern of reactions, what's the real discovery? Where's the beauty in things shattered and tagged if the same pattern of injustice ripples our lives? So maybe chaos isn't the right word. Let's try instead challenge. And since it means refuting the truth or its validity, isn't a protest a public dispute of someone else's truth? Like the one about the fear of dark bodies, how it justifies us being mangled or discredited in news cycles. Wouldn't the beauty then be new laws that get us closer to becoming the people the Constitution claims it protects? Let me begin again. When my wife told me several months ago she was pregnant, we knew the challenge of this birth could take her life, just as the challenge in a hospital threatened our daughters. And isn't it an act of faith to go blindfolded into the future and be delighted by the light there? Now we're lit by a dancing star named Jade, short for Jadesola, which in Yoruba means come into wealth. She's jade like the green stone said to emit wisdom and clarity. I'm feeding her while watching the YouTube video. Someone on screen yells, "We're better than this!" And she squeals, mouth dripping with her mother's milk, smiling while dreaming her baby dreams. That land of innocence, where it all starts before we lose our way back, rationalizing our destruction. Thanks. So the last poem in my set before I read the request that Stephen asked for, I have not forgotten you, Stephen, is this one is a prayer for the bees, and it's for Jade Rose. And there are poems from my other daughter Jasmine in here. So I have not forgotten Jasmine. Jasmine was actually in the journey. Jasmine was the baby that was 27 weeks alive in my wife, that poem. So I have not forgotten Jasmine. She's in here too. A prayer for the bees. Bless them all, nature's letter carriers and freighters. Their determination, like the busy engines of commerce, picking up and dropping off their haul. Bless this life of droning for the colony, working their sweet economy that sprouts the apples and pears, cooling in your crisper drawer. The coffee grounded and brewed that kicks your senses awake. Let's not forget the butternut squash, the one your wife roasted into a savory soup. That's them too. You can still feel the gentle bite of ginger. Bless those that build the hive. Bless the ones that clean it. Bless the defenders. Bless the undertakers ushering away the dead and diseased to keep the colony healthy. Bless the nurses incubating the babies. And bless the bastards dropping to their death after a tryst with the queen. Could you do it, you wonder? Die for sex, even if your life came down to that final task, even for the good of the colony. Bless their bravery. Bless their music streaming on your phone, their buzz, buzz, buzzing your fussy infant hears as a lullaby before letting it lull her back to sleep, before the whole house rests, grateful for their humble roles, their thankless sacrifices. Thank you. So, Stephen, I'm going to only read one of the Quasimodo pieces just because of the interest of time. So, I'm going to read, I think I know which one you want me to read. So, I'm going to read this one. And for those who don't know, Tim Siebels is an awesome poet. I think I speak for Stephen when I say that he's one of our favorite poets. He was the former poet laureate of Virginia. But anyway, Tim Siebels always does all these other persona poems. So here's my persona poem in the voice of Tim Siebels. So there's a poem that comes before this, Quasimodo and his Blues. And I figured who better to school Quasimodo than one of the coolest poets we know, Tim Siebel. So this is Tim Siebel Schools Quasimodo, or know what I'm saying? Come on, bro. Gonna be soggy as old sneaks, cause some woman you wanted shrieked as if you were straight out of a Hitchcock flick? Gonna dye your warts blue for a pity party when the muse is ever present? Rejection's a turnstile. Think you're the first to go through one? Think you're the first brother to scream your pain from life's bell towers? You're not in Paris anymore. And how could that gypsy woman not see your heart as big as Notre Dame, that it rings loud like bells tolling each hour? You're at the Bowery now. Whole lot of tongue tying to be had in here, my man. Get a load of that one at the bar. Can Esmeralda spill into a dress the way that poem spills her sexy syllables inside sequin stanzas? Tell me she ain't a riddle busting your brain to solve. If I was you, home slice, I forget that silly gypsy woman and try to get in some wordplay. I'm just saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan King, with another memorable performance here at Poets versus the Pandemic. Thank you very much. And so let me put into the chat a place where you can buy his and Stephen's book. And so I just put that in there. And now we'll go and we'll get the person who asked that, but who requested that poem. This is going to be Stephen Leyva. And Stephen Leyva's poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Two Bridges Review, Scallywag, Nashville Review, Prairie Schooner, and the Best American Poetry 2020, and others. He is a Cave Canem Fellow and author of the chapbook Low Parish, as well as the collection, The Understudies Handbook, which won the Gene Feldman Poetry Prize from the Washington Writers Publishing House. Stephen holds an MFA from the University of Baltimore, where he is an assistant professor in the Klein Family School of Communications Design. So let's bring Stephen Leyva up to the Poets versus the Pandemic stage. And as I say, Steve, have at it.
Thank you so much, Henry. It's such a pleasure to be here reading with my friend and my brother in poetry, Alan King. I think it is no fallacy if I were to say that we are both acolytes in the Church of Tim Siebels. We worship there daily, and I am very thankful for the ways in which friendships and mentorship that have been sincere have made space for me to make art. And I think I'm going to read some poems that kind of take on that connectedness in them. So I'm going to start with some new work. So here's a poem called "A Poem Avoiding Its Own Tour of Force." I could begin with the slate roof of sunset the smog has given us, or the low growl in the throat of a window, the AC unit exasperated. I could begin with the cold color of gunmetal, the aria of the bullet. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. I could begin in ocean, the gray headstones of dead coral, the only grave markers. Or approach the starting line of seashore, the eye is colonized first. Or fire the ceramics in our language. What name does the sculpture give to the clay when it lives in the kiln of a closed mouth? I could enunciate fear not better than any angel and begin with the gray snow on a rose bush, the promise of color. I could begin with the wheat we sow in ether, or the menagerie of jailed poets, pen, pen, pen. I could begin in doubt, true to our God, true to our native land. I could begin in error. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I could begin where I will end. In Ithaca's so gray, when one speaks their name, Baltimore will be the only word anyone hears. I could praise the present tense and begin again. I could condition this vow. I will not love anyone else, but instead begin to hum in your ear, reader, lover, gray stranger. All right. So I'm going to read another poem that, I was thinking about those things that have to do with what I will teach my son about being a part of African-American tradition, because he didn't grow up around my family. And as much as we talk about the ways in which Black folks don't want to be seen as a monolith, there are these things in which you better know when that song comes on, you don't want to be the only one not singing, So this is in that vein. And it's a reference to a song by UGK called International Players Anthem. So the title of the poem is, I know you're not a pimp, but pimp, remember what I taught you. International Players Anthem arrives on the static-free FM. That opening so reminiscent of Beowulf in translation. I turn from this Baltimore side street, the car grinding to bones as if the gnarled road were Grindel ravenous. I turn to my son, tell him round Andre 3000's quirky tenor, keep your heart. No need to invent new monsters. Like initiates at the altar of Black ubiquity, we anoint our foreheads so one day we can go to a wedding and sing, I choose you effortlessly like everyone else. Or maybe amend the atmosphere ripped by America's keenings on every census. All right, so a little sonnet work there. In that poem, kind of a little Wanda Coleman-esque sonnet. Wanted to read a poem about tenderness and about a barbershop. This is called Early Morning Fade. The barber's knuckles brush the highest ridge of your cheekbone. His tenderness can reach you like a rose petal landing in an untroubled pool in Bethesda. The heel of his palm cradles the clippers as if a baby doll were held there, too small to be real, too important to put down. He fusses over an edge line before handing you a mirror. What do you say to yourself? All right, I'm going to read one more poem. It's a longer poem, and then I'll read a couple of poems from the Understudies Handbook. And I just want to be mindful of like how we're moving through time too. So I'm going to read A Crown of Sonnets. I think some of you know that A Crown of Sonnets are linked sonnets in which the last word of one sonnet becomes last line of one sonnet becomes the first line of the next sonnet. All of these sonnets really function like pastorals and sort of take on what a pastoral means when we were all quarantined. So it's called Halo. 1. The accordion of icicles has paused its torch song, and the snow-blind cardinal sings the red from its back into the dawn's plaintive daylight, which rubs a thumb across the sagging gutters of row homes and alleys without considering a single lily. What is cruel here? No favor given to the green hills scratching the belly of Cumberland, Maryland. Abandoned mills kick in their sleep like dreaming dogs. No meritocracy can save Ellicott City from another flood. The Orioles off-season has all of Baltimore in a beer glass. Does anyone remember the name of the last mayor sent to jail? At the car wash down the block, graffiti separates one water from another. Oh God of the voided year, of the indifferent sunlight, give us the daily bread of quarantine, the longing to be touched by a letter in the mail, the bald cry in the bathroom, the music of snow. 2. By a letter in the mail, the bald cry in the bathroom, the music of snow, love has learned its last arpeggio. What good is it to sing in the empty amphitheater of winter? And yet the sparrow drags the diva of spring back again, encore after encore. The blue jays evicting the other birds from a hollowed out gourd, the inconsistent applause of cookware coaxed from the back of a cabinet, the exhaust fan whistling around. Love is a chord we cannot pluck out of morning air, not alone. Every instrument must be touched, held aloft on the crown of a shoulder, kissed or left mute. Old tabla rasas of bay windows manifest our breath, asking, won't you write your name? Anything to be touched. The chime of notifications, no one confuses for a love song, but notice the sincere chorus of crocus, accompanying the crepe myrtle in the yard, and the stubborn rosemary bullying the garden, and the scrape of the postal truck weighed with late mail, all these altars burning in our eyes. Look at how much we don't know about loneliness. 3, all these altars burning in our eyes. Look at how much. We don't know about loneliness sought. Cities no longer coughing on SUVs. Let me clear my throat. The ringlet of lampposts on Main Street as useless as a rose bush in winter. The sold out signs hanging on the grocery shelves. Give me a break. The land makes a hymn without lyrics. No sense in mumbling. Every kind of hum arrives on the bones of derelict bridges below Harper's Ferry, rust by any other name. The dead stars hang like DJ's posters saying, coming soon. The turntables of sun and moon scratch the sky's vinyl. How can we not dance in the kitchen alone, making toast, frying an egg? Every day we are searching for the perfect outfit, a few fly boots, a coat that won't quit to enter the club of memory. Slipping the bouncer a $20 bill from our childhood. The petty cash begged at the parent's knee, anticipation, the fear of walking home empty-handed after asking for a lover's number, the deft touch of a porch light across the cheek. 4, after asking for a lover's number, the deft touch of a porch light across the cheek is like horizon's blushing grin in the daily obad of dawn, amen. After asking for a lover's number, the deft touch of a porch light across the cheek is like the anglerfish whose luminosity and ugliness coexist. Amen. After asking for a lover number, the deft touches of a porch light across the cheek, is there enough to fill the wolf's mouth and see what it eats? Amen. After asking for a lover's number, the deft touch, a porch light across the cheek is like any other kiss, tender but never enough, shameless. Amen. After asking for a lover number, each deft touch, a porch light across a cheekbone so high it forms a balcony for birthmarks. Heat leaps at your palm. Amen. After asking for a lover's number, the deft touch, a porch lights across a cheek like a borrowed Zippo, flash and then gone with the scent of faux Chanel. Amen. After asking for a lover's number, the deft touch of a porch light across the cheek curves summer into the shape of an apple. Still, there is curse enough for every amen. 5, curves, summer, the shape of apples. Still, a curse breaks. Every amen uttered is a sign of hunger. Simple wait. But what of the stem we twist and discard? What of the core made svelte by teeth? What of the seeds black as coal briquette? What of the skin barely holding in its sweet? What of the heat of cider? What of the disobedience required to know anything? What of the evenings alone hanging overripe in the air? What of being put in a barrel? What of enduring the press? What of the hesitancy to blush? Who can answer for a season of being disposable? What of the willingness to rot? What of the hospitals brimming like an untended orchard? Simple. Go and ferment, August announces. Go and caramel yourself, some September shouts back. Take a photosynthesis back to its source, the nerve of the sun, the laziest god of all to go on shining while a whole year's plans have fallen underfoot like forgotten apples. And what of returning to the earth? Fuck it, says the worm. I can eat anywhere. Yes, worm, and feed the fish that make a miracle of replication as the days do cruelly. Isn't there another way to know we need one another? 6, cruelty isn't there. Another way to know that we need one another to live. My son eager to fry an egg for his sister, or he and I playing chess for the first time. I'm no good at this, he says, slumping his cheek in his hand like a mandarin orange in a ramekin. Slip, sweep, the board astonished and clean. We bust up. Obsolete high school dance moves stuffing the kitchen floor, the kids unimpressed and having never seen The Wiz circle like crows. You can't win. Easy now. I am too early to every elegy. My wife lifts a half grin watching the kids pretend to sing karaoke while a sleeve of macaroons evaporates like mist. How did we manage to fix a leaking fridge and a basement light socket by the grace of YouTube? And this is the easiest of our questions. We don't talk about the third day without water my mother endured in Texas. What is the opposite of cruelty? We scrub our teeth with any comfort, coffee, laughter, and illuminated text. If not comfort, then the common sense of beauty. 7, if not comfort, then common sense. Beauty shifts its weight like a grifter meeting a mark. Soon, we will pull up the gaffer's tape from all our impromptu stages, the hobbies we started, the friends we blocked with our bay window curtains, the tomatoes that refused to grow, the small district of new stretch marks on our bellies. And the Council of Cold Weather will come back with its banal advice. Baltimore streets wilding with holiday music once again. The recycling trucks running on time, slapping their polyrhythms among the morning doves. The mosquitoes either dead or mourning. The crepe myrtle in the yard nodding yes. We account for what we've lost by cooking the ledger. We wake to touch the thermostat, remembering an infant's foot. Conductor's baton. The accordion of icicles stretches its torch song. Whew. So I know that's a round around the mulberry bush with that crown, but maybe that felt a little bit what it was like to live through that pandemic with me. All right, so maybe I'll just read like one or two here from the understudy because I want to be mindful of that experience. So there is a poem I always read when I get a chance to read from my book, and it's a poem called Supremacy. I just had it, which it's really built on the idea of metaphor, and I think that metaphor is one thing that binds us all together. Supremacy. So I should say, if you've ever played badminton, you'll understand the metaphor. And even if you haven't, you'll still be able to follow it. Supremacy. Consider the shuttlecock, its deft lightness, its rubber nose unbent, its attention to racket, its fear of the ground, its willingness to lob or smash, its whiteness, its penchant for being held afloat by the slightest breeze and histories of swing, how it needs to be batted between two players, how it recognizes their want. Consider its feathers, its plastic, its conical shape suggesting hierarchy, and always its weight in your hand, how it seeks to be served. So I think I'll end with a poem that is about a middle school dance. Maybe you remember the particular awkwardness of a middle school dance, but this is the poem that Paisley Rechdel selected for Best American Poetry 2020, which really just had a profound, and affirming wind in my sails moment for me as a poet. So I'm gonna close with this with special thanks to Paisley Rechdel for seeing me in it, and this is very Tim Siebel's type poem for sure. So it's got a little bit of like 69 Boys, it's got a little Boys to Men, so a little bit of everything for everybody in terms of if you are of a certain age. When I feel a whoop coming on for the feast of Whitsuntide and after school dances. Ain't the butterfly, it's the Tootsie Roll, the speakers pose as a polemic against your narrow hips. This circles musk, classmates grinding like black pepper in a cheap mill, uneven, coarse. Shamelessly, you practice outside the arc of polo shirts, crop tops and starchy jeans sharp enough to cut penumbras from 8th graders. Summon an adolescent faith to push past the girl who laid her tongue in your mouth like a lisp on a field trip to the zoo right in front of the rhino exhibit. Your lonely Afro-Latino blood bids the center of hype, ooh, and funk to be filled with your inheritance. Flat feet, a skinny boy's sense of rhythm, and a soft uptown fade. Go, boy, go, you've only heard in church. This dance is different than the Holy Ghost shout filling half an hour on Sunday. Nothing like the body rock of your father's bachata he'd pull out to prove men with flat asses could dance. Still, you press and press, throw your knees like bolos, catch up to the DJ's scratch in time for the song to switch choruses. Boys to men, don't wait till the water runs dry. Those violins still weep for the awkward slow drags you'll soon try, but there's a 2-second panoply where you've imitated the other boys in their non-buttered fly and their woe too sweet. There, at least a hip moment of locomotion where no one could charge you with a lack of blackness. To the left, to the right, more flame than Pentecost, eyes like 2 upper rooms, holy ghosted, your body becoming a tongue spoken. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Stephen Leyva. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to turn the Zoom room over to Karen Alanier, our grand inquisitor here, and she's going to conduct a Q&A with Alan and Stephen.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so I have a question myself, and that is, I was wondering if both of you could talk about your process for how your work comes about, and possibly the form that you might put your work in. I know that Stephen Leyva is doing a lot of formalism, and I think that Alan is doing something that is more like free verse. So Alan, why don't you start and talk about your process and the shape that you like to put your poems in?
Yeah, so I like to play with form, like if I'm struggling with the poem. So like if I'm if I'm trying to tease out the rest of the poem, and I'm only getting like a few lines, I may play with a pantoum, I may do a villanelle, and usually like those will help get more of the poem out. And then another thing I like to do too, and this is probably from my journalism background, but like I'll take once I have a poem in its form, I'm like, okay, what happens when I start taking it out of that form and moving things around, and and just seeing how the tension in the piece changes, but in terms of writing the poem, like I've never been one of those folks that can walk around with a journal. If I do that, nothing's getting written because I guess the expectation of creating, like having that journal, is kind of like this pressure on me to try to create something. So I'm one of those folks that love digital notebooks, because then it's less pressure. It's on my phone. If something comes to me, I can whip out my phone and get some ideas down. But yeah, I mean, they process the poems come to me, and there are different things that trigger it, like the poem Prayer for the Bees. That came when I was bathing Jade Rose, and I actually had my phone in the bathroom and had the bee sound on to try to keep her calm, because she was trying to climb out the tub. So I had to put the bee sounds on to keep her in there. But they come when they come, and yeah, I don't have like a set place where I sit to create or anything like that. They just come when they come. So I don't know about you, Stephen.
Yeah, I think everything for me initiates with the foundation of euphony, right? Like that we have to be in a kind of theater of sound in order for the reader's attention to focus. In other words, like if it don't sing, right, I don't want the reader to be like, why am I wasting my time? I'm going to go read a novel. So I'm often building up from some fragments of assonance or consonants, or things that are kind of just pleasurable in the ear. But never sort of like giving myself fully over to that so that it becomes like nonsense, right? It's just that's the foundation I want to build up from, is a kind of rhythm, a kind of music. And then I think about the ways I think I read, like I try to read to try to absorb music from other writers. So in some ways, some of you may know like Paul Celan's very famous Death Fugue poem. He's writing in German, but in the in one particular translation in English, that the opening line is "Black milk of daybreak, we drink you at sundown." Like that haunts me, right? Even in its sonics just haunt me all the time. And so I'm always trying to like that's the bar I'm trying to reach. Like if I can get that kind of haunting, sticking with you sort of music, then it then creates possibilities. And then in regard to like form, writing, there's a bunch of sonnets in here that I just sort of call Creole sonnets. They behave, in their own sort of way. But 14 lines are the kind of box they're playing in. But I think that form for me is a way to arrive at a silence, so that all of the kind of swirl of like cliched language or like, or just functional language that we deploy for various reasons can quiet. And then that, when I'm at that silence, form allows me to let the inner voice sort of come out. So it's always trying to sort of be a way to sort of quiet the noise a little bit, so that I can arrive at something that feels fresh.
Well, thank you both. Those are really interesting ideas. It's always great to talk to the authors when they're live and get them to tell us how you're writing and what's going on with your writing. I'm going to turn the program back to Henry to close out the evening, and thank you all for coming. This was a terrific program.
Well, once more, let's have a little more. Let's have some Zoom applause for Alan King and Stephen Leyva. Yay. Yes, yes, yes. I hope you enjoyed this evening's readers, and will extend your enjoyment by purchasing books and letting others know about the series. I'll put the links back into the chat, and I'll do that right now. Okay. And please come out on Monday, December 6, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present Donika Kelly and Jay Rogoff. And we hope to see you again on YouTube when our 2021 year in review comes out. That will be released on December 15, 2021. And it's a tribute to all of the poets who have appeared this year. I've seen a couple of you out there in the audience, and we have our two poets tonight who will be in there. And we hope that you'll all enjoy it. So, good night, everyone, and stay safe.